In conversation with Robyn Michaels. Robyn Michaels is a retired dog groomer and has titled Dogs in Performance and Conformation. She didn't go to college until she was 30 and took CLEP exams to avoid prerequisites. She has a degree in anthropology with concentration in African and Indian studies and a master's in urban planning. She was a Peace Corps volunteer in Malawi. She has Asperger's. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have Robyn Michaels on the show today. How are you doing, Robyn?
I'm great. How are you all doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fine too. It's awesome to have you on the show today. I'm excited.
Me too.
Yeah. So, Robbins, could you tell us about your book, The Player Seeker? How does this book come about? What inspired you to write The Player Seeker?
Well, I'll tell you. Uh, on my second trip to Africa, I volunteered at a girls' school in Kajiado, Kenya. And
Oh,
I volunteered partly to see if I'd like the Peace Corps lifestyle because I come
wow.
from a very developed area. We have, electricity and running water in our houses and heat and air conditioning. And around the corner to a store, we have public transportation. But of course, in most of Africa, and this is 40 years ago, people didn't have those things. So when I volunteered, I didn't know what I'd be doing, but I wanted
Mm.
to practice my Kiswahili, so I asked to be placed in either Kenya or Tanzania. I got
Wow.
placed in Kenya. I was at the girls' school. We were making bricks. Now, we're Americans. We don't know anything about physical labor, but they taught us how to mix the materials and put them into frames. And then we're supposed to put water on them to cure them. And then we'd have enough bricks for a school block.
Mm.
Um, and I didn't know how this would work, but in any case, we were told if a teacher at the school asked us to teach her class, we should stop making bricks and teach her class. So a teacher approached me because I was one of the oldest people in our group of seven. And she said, "Would you teach my class?" And I said, "What's your lesson?" And her lesson was how Jesus Christ is with us every day in our lives. And I said, "I'm sorry, I can't teach this." And she said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, I'm a Jew. Jesus Christ isn't with me every day in my life."
Oh,
And she said, "You don't believe in Jesus?" And I said, "It's not that. We believe he existed. We just don't believe he's the Messiah. We don't believe in virgin birth." And she
mm.
said, "Well, what do you believe?" And I said, "Well, I had to think about this because you don't think about this every day, I don't think." And I said, "Well, you know something? We don't really believe in hell." And there was
Wow.
another teacher with me who was also Jewish, and she said, "Well, we don't believe in heaven either." And actually, if you read the Old Testament, there's nothing about heaven or hell. There's just
Mm.
like, you're not going to go to the promised land unless you follow God's instructions to the letter exactly. So,
Wow.
anyways, so all these teachers are listening to us. And the teacher asked me, "Well, what causes you to be good?" And I said, you know, responsibility to your community, just basic altruism works for all of us. Well, the word spread that we weren't missionaries. We were the first white people, Wazungu, to come to their community that weren't
Mm.
missionaries, and we were the first white people they'd ever seen do physical labor. So that got me thinking because in my community, Jews are pretty much assimilated. Until
Wow.
recently, we didn't have much anti-Semitism. It's like people are living their lives, they don't have time to get involved with what you believe. Although I've been proselytized to a lot, and I mean, I just don't understand that at all. But in any case,
Wow.
that got me thinking, and I wanted to address the idea that there are other people of other religions that do believe in God, but it's not really their belief in God so much that causes them to be good. It's their
Mm.
connection to their community.
Absolutely.
Now, the problem is, especially East Africa, and very little has been written about this. Asians were basically grabbed and transported to East Africa, basically to be coolies or slaves. And a lot of Americans don't realize that. We think that after our Civil War, that was the end of slavery in the world, and that was not. And a lot of people don't realize that still exists and how it exists. But also, it's hard to be an other. That's what we are. We who aren't Christian. Wherever you go, people wonder how you could exist without being saved. And so my character mainly addresses that. And he also addresses the fact that he was in love with somebody of another religion, but he had responsibility to his parents and his community.
Mm,
He marries somebody he thinks is appropriate. It turns out their values aren't the same. But all this time he's getting his other education too, because his first lover told him, you have to stay in school as long as somebody's paying your way. And
mm.
finally he gets his education. He realizes that he can't live his life to make other people happy. He has to live his life, the best way he knows how. And that's what my
Wow.
book is about.
Wow, that's quite amazing, really. That's a tone of response. I love the sound of it. And I like the fact that you mentioned that it's not their belief in God that got them to be good, it's their connection with their community. And that's actually true because I'm a huge fan of teams like this and how people's, character being good or evil has no respect to religion or, believe in one God or the other, etc. Yeah, so that's an amazing team to mention, and that's something impressive for you to mention. I need to comment that. I love the sound of it. And now, for readers who haven't read the book yet, and without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what would expect picking up the player seeker?
Okay. Well, the thing is, it starts out where he's got his education. He has become a performer, actually. He calls himself an accidental rock star because he does it and he performs because he's
Mm,
making money and he has to make money while he can make money. And that's what performers do. But he knows that, this isn't going to last forever. In any case,
wow,
the book starts out where he's performing and he's on a TV show. And the host of the TV show asks him how he met his wife. And he says, oh, I've always known her. She's the granddaughter of the man who bought my father. And they start
wow,
talking about slavery. And of course, it's very shocking to Americans that there's somebody here who's educated who
wow,
knows slaves. But he goes into what his life was like in Arusha. Arusha,
mm,
Tanzania, now is a very big city, but in
wow,
the 80s, there was nothing there. So he describes his life there, how he became interested in piano, because he's like any
mm,
kid, he's interested in how things work and moving parts and that kind of thing. And he is then offered a piano to sell. His
wow,
brothers are going to school in Singapore and they get a scholarship, but they have to raise the transport money. So people around town give him things to sell so he can make a commission. He decides he's going to buy it himself and he's going to learn to play this piano.
mm,
He follows his brothers to Singapore and he's doing okay, but it's his first world experience and it's like being on another planet, traffic and lights that go on when you turn the switch and water that
yeah,
comes out of the tap, that kind of thing, and stores that sell TVs and stores that sell candy and stores that sell records. It's like very overwhelming to
wow,
him. But his mentor suggests he might have better opportunities in Europe. So he arranges for him to go to Europe and that's when the proselytizing starts. And it's like, it's just, why is that so important to people? But he's with other teenagers at that time. He
wow,
goes through a period of sexual awakening because he's in love with the granddaughter of the guy who bought his father. And he loves her, but she's older and she tells him, we're not even going to consider marriage until you get out of school. You've got to go to
mm,
school. And so he stays in and he has other, experiences and he meets other students and they start jamming together playing music. And he also gets a job at a recording studio. So he
wow,
learns about music production. And that's how that thing starts, where somebody sends out a tape to a music contest, they get a agent, they get booked, he's making money, and he's still in
wow,
school. He's also teaching calculus. He's a sort of a savant, and it's very
wow,
easy for him. But he's doing music and he's staying in school and he's very, very busy. He ultimately meets his wife. His father-in-law meets his father while he goes on safari. He meets the guy's daughter, decides she'd be appropriate. They
mm,
barely know each other, but they're both sick. So he decides to marry her, and then living with her, he realizes their values are really vastly different.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
and
Just
this is the thing too. She was educated in a Catholic school, and a lot of people of other religions send their children to Catholic schools because they believe their children will get better educations at private
hmm.
schools than they would at public schools. But in
Oh
the
wow.
meantime, their children may be inculcated in another religion, and it could go either way. It could be
Hmm.
like, well, that's interesting, you believe that, but I'm getting, an academic education, and that's fine.
Hmm.
And other people decide this is the way to go.
Wow.
And he's that's something they don't agree on. And this is the thing. This is the fundamental difference between Christians and people of other religions. Not that the rest of us don't proselytize and we feel whatever you believe is your business. And that was my attitude when I was in Africa. I didn't come here to change what you believe, just to see how you live, help wherever I can. But
Hmm.
Christians believe as long as if you've accepted Jesus Christ as your savior, you
Yeah.
can do a lot of pretty bad things. Just say, "Well, I'm not perfect, but Jesus will forgive me and I'll go to heaven."
Wow.
And that seems to be the big thing. Whereas the rest of us is like, we don't know what happens after you die. That's up to
Wow.
God. Or if you don't believe in God, if you believe you're more spiritual, it's whatever it is, it is. You don't really know,
Wow.
and you can't be concerned with an afterlife. You have to
Hmm.
have a good life while you're on earth, and part of that is being responsible to your community.
Wow. Wow. You've got a trunk load of answers to this question, and I love the sound of it. Sounds very compelling, and I like the theme that your book centers on because it's one that is quite argumentative and quite debateful. So it's always arousing conversation, one or two ways, etc. And now I am curious to know if you experience any challenges in the process of writing Player Seekers. If there is any, could you share with us what challenge it is and how you ultimately overcame it? Also, I'd love to ask you, how do you handle criticism as a writer, especially the negative ones?
Well, I'll tell you, I've always been a writer, so that's not really the problem. The problem is really editing. And the more you write, the more you learn to edit yourself. But
Yeah,
also, I mean, it's very easy now that everybody's online and you're on Facebook too. You can find other new writers,
yeah,
and we call them beta readers, BETA, beta readers, where you give
yeah.
them your work and they'll critique your work. And you have to be open to that because you're too close to yourself. And there's some things you never really see or you don't understand that you're saying or not saying. So it's very helpful to have those people. This book took me about 4 years to write. I had to do a lot of research. I kept doing research. People suggested other books for me to read, and that was very helpful. I had to hire a development editor, and she realized I was redundant in many instances, and so that helped a lot. The
Mm,
real challenge was finding an agent, and I could not. And part of the reason is it just started happening around COVID. The publishing industry has changed a lot. It
uh,
used to be if you had any decent story, people would you could get an agent who represented your genre and they'd market your book. It's much more difficult now if you are not I want to say a genre reader or writer. This is not, there's a romance in this book, but it's not a romance. It's sort of
wow,
historical because it is accurate, but a lot of agents who represent historical, they're thinking the last century or the century before last, the 1800s.
yeah,
It's not mystery. It's not a thriller. It's not science fiction. It might be considered speculative fiction because there's a lot in the book about recording and sound. He becomes a sound engineer that probably wouldn't fit anyplace else. But it also
wow,
addressed current issues in performing and music sales and well, basically that kind of thing. And also uh, basically who taking care of your parents and their future too. People,
wow,
everybody has to consider that. Uh,
wow,
so I decided to self-publish partly because even if you do get an agent, it could be months or years before they sell your book, and then it could be months or
Absolutely.
years before
Yeah,
it gets published. And that's why so
absolutely.
many writers now are self-publishing. The big thing is marketing. And
Yeah,
so I'm doing Instagram and book talk and Facebook ads and blogs and podcasts like this.
yeah.
And I just have to keep promoting the book. I have to talk to book clubs and people connected actually with synagogues that have book clubs because I am a Jewish writer.
Wow.
And that's really those are really the big problems is marketing the book.
Wow. That's quite amazing to know, really. I love your take on this. Thank you so much for sharing. And now, Robyn, I've always been fascinated about how authors, especially novelists like yourself, craft long sentences and brings words together in a way that it eventually makes a great novel. These always leave me thinking about how exactly they got their ideas and inspiration. Now, as far as writing is concerned, I would love to ask you, how do you get your inspiration and ideas? Where do they come from?
Well, like I said, the first time was that trip 40 years ago in Africa where I was asked what I believed. So that started that. And
Oh,
then meeting when I was in East Africa, I met so many uh, Muslim and Sikh people. And the thing is, they're sort of used to Christians proselytizing, but everybody lives in the same community. And that was the interesting thing about Arusha too. I know that when I was in Africa, and I was over a year in Malawi, and I've gone back and
wow.
forth several times, I never experienced racism. People may be distrustful of, Zungu, Wazungu, white people, but basically, people are pretty tolerant and cordial and polite and well behaved.
That's true.
That's not true of America. If you're different,
Yeah.
you're regarded like you're from another planet. Now I live in a very diverse community, racially, ethnically, even
Mm,
economically. We have everybody where I am
absolutely.
because
Yeah.
we have public transportation here. We have a lot of high density housing. We're very close to Lake Michigan. Everybody wants to live here. Racism is not a problem, but you go out of a big urban area and you're really not welcome. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what race you are. You're a stranger
Wow.
and you're not welcome.
Yeah.
And I found that in Africa, people are more, well, because so many people are so together, uh, they're much more tolerant of difference. Whereas here, no, you got to fit into the mold. And right now, we're going through some serious problems. We got a crazy man who denied that he did not win the last election, and he's running again, and people love him. The guy's
Wow.
a scoundrel. He's a cheat. He's a liar. He does not respect anybody. He doesn't believe in climate change. He's all out for himself. But
Wow.
he appointed Supreme Court people to the Supreme Court who've tried to make abortion illegal, as though what you do in your personal life affects anybody else. And in the meantime, while they want abortion to be illegal, they have not. We put all our money into war in the United States
Mm,
and uh, weapons. We do not put them into social services. We've got the money to take care of everybody. We've got a homeless problem here. We've got a food insecurity problem here. And also we have a huge crisis migration problem here, but we're off in the rest of the world fighting battles that don't concern us. And it's like, oh my goodness. And it really divides us. It really divides us
mm,
between people like me who wonder what the hell's going on, and then them who believe we should make the rest of the world be like us.
yeah.
So,
Imagine. Wow. Wow, that's quite amazing, really. I can go on and on listening to you. It's quite amazing, really. Yeah. I love
yeah,
the
don't get me
sound.
started.
I love the sound of your book and I love your illustration and answers too. Thank you so much for sharing.
Well, as I said, I've got Asperger's. I've got no filter. It's sort of like if it strikes me as like not right, I'll tell you it's not right. One nice thing is, as I said, as you know, I started out being a dog groomer. I learned to groom dogs when I was a young teenager, and dogs don't talk back. If you learn to communicate with them, you could get along with them just fine. But their owners are insane. And that's something else I address in the book because early on, when he's meeting my main character, Dayal Singh, is meeting his this family. They're Jews from America, and she talks about grooming dogs, and he can't imagine having enough money to pay for a dog's haircut. And
Wow.
I can relate to that. I totally understand that. Is that, if you've got enough money to pay for a dog's haircut, you actually have too much money. So.
Honestly.
I mean,
Wow.
it kept me in business, but it was what it was. That people do not know the difference between a problem and an inconvenience, that kind of thing.
Wow, that's good, amazing. I love your answers to the question, really. And now I'd love to ask you, Robyn, apart from the player seekers, do you have any other works you've authored or maybe currently working on?
Well, yes, I blog once a week at disparate.wordpress.com, and that's about everything. It could be about dog stuff, but it's usually about what's happening in the news. I do other book reviews. It's sort of an exercise. It's a creative exercise. I come from a family actually of physical, creative, visual artists. My
Oh,
two uncles are artists. My grandfather was an artist, um, and I was encouraged to do visual arts, and I did that. I did pottery. I did
wow,
painting. And then grooming dogs is sort of sculpting. So learning to make a dog look good. And I enjoyed that. But now I'm older and I'm doing more writing and I do both uh, nonfiction and fiction writing, just as an
wow,
exercise, and I'm working on a bunch of things, but there's so many different ways to tell a story. So, you come up with a sort of an idea and then you have to flesh it out and uh make it compelling. I don't know how
yeah.
many people have read like Haruki Murakami. He's a very well-known Japanese writer. He
Hmm.
writes what I would probably call speculative fiction.
Wow.
Uh he his stories like go on forever, but by the end of the story you wonder why did he need all these words to tell this story?
Hmm.
So you want the story to be interesting, but it gets to the point where if you're verbose, you're going to lose your audience too. I don't
Hmm.
like a story where I have to read a sentence two or three times to find out what they're really saying. I want to be pretty straightforward about what my characters are saying and what they're experiencing.
Wow. Wow, that's quite lovely to know, really. Thank you so much for sharing. It really sounds amazing to me. And now, is there anything that you'd love to share with the viewers about your book that we did not mention in this interview and you'd love the viewers to know? Also, what sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling with publishing a book? What would you advise people in this category?
Well, all right, here I think here's the copy of the book.
Yeah,
This is what
yeah.
it looks
And
like in
I love the
hardcover.
map on the cover. That's a map of Africa.
Yes, and
Yeah,
there are
interesting.
music notes on the map because Dale, the main character, is a musician. He's a physicist and a musician. Um, I'll tell you, you learn as you go along. I've learned from so many other writers. So I'd say try to join a writers group if you can, and you can find them on Facebook sometimes. There's so many groups. Uh,
Absolutely.
Try to find an editor you can work with. That's very important. And just write because if you don't have something down on the page, you have nothing to change. So you've got to
Absolutely.
start out that way. The other thing is it's very easy to publish your own book now. Now I did the hardcover this on Ingram Spark, and I did
Wow.
Ingram Spark because they do distribution. So if you have
Mm,
a bookstore or a library and you want to order a hard copy of the book, you would probably go to Ingram Spark. And people in the book industry know that. It's on Amazon and you could buy it on Amazon. Now, I know it's just Amazon USA, but it might be available
everywhere.
in
Yeah,
on
Amazon
other
UK,
countries. I'm not
Canada.
really sure. I
Yeah, it
also
is.
I did the ebook And I'm not an ebook reader. I do read on the internet, but I prefer to go back and forth and underline and,
Me too.
that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Or see, oh, did he say that? It's just easier if you have a hard copy. But for
Yeah.
people who like ebooks, I did draft to digital. The only problem with draft to digital is that you have to format your book in such a way that the computer doesn't get all the words out of order. That was sort of
Mm.
difficult, but once I learned to format, I was able to upload the book. I
Wow.
actually had an artist, she designed the book. You don't just like type it in and then upload it as text because then it comes out sort of like a letter. It doesn't come out as a book. So she designed the
Good.
book, and I'll show you an example of here. Like here's chapter 3. So she did the heading,
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
like what they
Yeah.
call dingbats, curlicues, and that,
Yeah,
that sort of helps make the book more readable, to tell you the truth.
absolutely.
Right. And so I uploaded the cover too. And then Draft to Digital will distribute your book to any uh online source that sells ebooks. So it's on
Ebooks.
Apple Books, it's
Wow.
on Roku, it's on Kobo. I just like looked where it is now, and it's on like 20 different sources as an ebook.
Wow.
Because it's not in print, I can sell it for like I can give it away or sell it for like $2.99. And
Wow.
that's the thing too, is that if it's sold internationally, you have to sort of do a currency converter so you don't lose money.
Yeah.
But the positives about an ebook, it's just easy to get them out there and you don't have book returns. Whereas with a hard copy, if they buy like half a dozen copies of your book and it doesn't sell, they may send it back to Ingram Spark, and then the author, has to pay for those returns.
Wow.
So, I mean, you learn that kind of thing as you go along. The other thing is there's some writers now, especially genre writers, they
Mm.
just bang them out. They do like a story every month or two, and they have a following. I'm not that kind of writer where I can just, because to me, if it's like a romance, it's basically the same thing with a different location, and that's
Yeah.
not what's important to me is the story. And to me, this story about a sick guy who he's very altruistic, he's very moral, he's got a lot of integrity,
Mm.
uh, and he keeps being challenged. And I think that's the most important thing for people to realize, that just because you don't believe in heaven doesn't mean you believe in the devil.
Wow.
So it's all within you,
Wow.
you know.
Wow. Wow, that's quite amazing to know, really. That's really amazing. I love your take on this and I love your answers to this question. Sounds quite informative and yeah, to me. So thank you for sharing. And now, Robyn, in case we have some viewers who are currently watching this interview and would like to get a copy of Player Seeker, on what platform is it available on for purchase?
Well, like I said, it's on Kindle as an ebook. It's on Apple Books. It's on Roku. Here's the thing, there are so many books called Pleasure Seekers. Uh,
Yeah, so you have to play
if
the
you key
title.
in The Pleasure Seeker by Robyn Michaels into Google,
Hmm.
probably Amazon may come up first, but there'll
Okay,
be other outlets where you can get the book.
great.
And I mean, I don't know internationally if you have to get a money order. I don't know, or if you have an online account like PayPal, you can use that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Robyn Michaels' books directly on Amazon. So thank you so much, Robyn, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation with you.
Yeah, it's great having that conversation with you too, Peter. I'm so glad that we got together.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well. I'm excited.
And actually, when you have it up on YouTube, if anybody's got questions, I'll try to respond.
That'll be great. Yeah, that'll be much appreciated. Thank you.